The Jag Bros are back, and the 2024 Jacksonville Jaguars season is finally over. We are three brothers. I'm Jack, along with my brothers JT and Joey. We grew up in Jacksonville. We are diehard Jaguars fans in the ups, in the downs, and hopefully maybe a turnaround. But there's been a ton of Jaguars news. On Monday, Shad Khan let Jaguars fans know that Doug Pederson would be fired and relieved of his duties, while Trent Baalke is going to stay and assist in the head coaching search. Both Baalke and Khan have spoken to the media. And then yet on Tuesday, the Jaguars released their official interview list for who they plan to interview for the head coach position. So we're going to talk about all that. We're going to look at some of the top options. But let's just start right off the top. Wherever you guys want to start, there's been a ton of Jaguars news. What are your feelings right now as a diehard Jags fan?
Yeah, well, I'm happy Doug is gone. He did a really good job in his first season, and it kind of seems like that's what he did with the Eagles, and then kind of fell off, and then never could find that spark or whatever made that 2022 team special. What he was doing just wasn't working, and it didn't seem like he was ever changing his style up or anything, and when you just keep doing the same thing, I mean, you got to go. Like, he had no answers. His press conferences were awful. He was flabbergasted and had no idea what was going on. The whole Trent Baalke thing now staying, I'm not as opposed to it as a lot of other people. Like, a lot of people are like, burn the Jaguars, sell all your tickets, never be a Jags fan again. I don't think he's been so terrible. The issue with him staying is I don't think he plays well in the sandbox with the head coach, and you don't want to limit yourself the pool of possibilities. Like, Ben Johnson is the apple of everyone's eye, and it seems like he would want his own GM. So why keep Trent Baalke? He's had some hits in drafting. He's had some misses in drafting. I think he's had some hits in free agent with Evan Ingram and some, but he's also had huge misses this year. So he's up and down. I wouldn't say he's the worst GM, but it's not just about the talent. It's also about how well you are cohesive with the head coach. And I just don't know if he can get along with anyone. I've never seen any head coach happy to work with him. So that's why I'm against keeping him, but I'm not like this is the end of the world. But I think JT may be on the end of the world side.
I've been trying to talk myself and be more optimistic. And look, maybe we'll strike lightning with whatever coach we end up getting next. But we said at the end of last year, look, this has the makings with the Press Taylor, Doug Pederson situation, very similar for Gator fans of what happened with Dan Mullen and Todd Grantham. So as Gator fans will remember, the year before Dan Mullen gets fired, the defensive coordinator, Todd Grantham, absolutely should have been fired. However, Dan stuck by him, and ultimately that became his downfall. Similarly, Press Taylor absolutely deserved to be fired from the performance that the Jaguars put on the field in 2023, particularly the back half of 2023. By Doug Pederson deciding to keep Press Taylor and keep him at calling the plays, that's ultimately been what his downfall is. It was clear that Trevor and Press and Doug were not always on the same page with the offensive scheme. It just wasn't working out. The locker room was not in step with what Doug Pederson was saying. It just was all unraveling. He deserved to be fired after this. It's unfortunate. I think he's a good guy, but it needed to happen. And then you look at the Baalke situation. Joey, you and I were texting about this. You've obviously been a little bit more optimistic on Baalke. I said in some ways this is 65% on Doug Pederson and coaching, 35% on Baalke. This is probably an 8-8 type of team that Baalke has constructed, and we obviously won 4 wins. So this is underperforming, which is why a lot of this has been on the coaching. But the reality is, too, this is not like this is an all-star team that should all of a sudden be competing for championships in the next year or two either. And when you layer on top of the fact that Baalke has not gotten along with Doug Pederson or Harbaugh or most of the other coaches he's interacted with, you really have to question retaining him. And I'm sure we'll talk about the Shad Khan comments in a second in that virtual interview he did. But what are we doing? It just feels like a continuation of this idea of let's just continue accepting mediocrity for mediocrity's sake, and an owner who would rather let other people control the outcome of this team.
Exactly. And that's my point. You look at the last 3 years for the Jaguars, 2022 was a year when you look at the roster that coaching helped them overachieve. I think it was probably a 6, 7, maybe 8 win team. They get on fire. They get a couple things that go their way. We make the playoffs. We get an incredible comeback win, and we're riding high. And then 2023, you look at the talent, we don't make very many moves. The draft class does not have a big impact that year. And so we sit around the same talent level again of 7, 8, 9 wins. And yes, coaching was a massive problem. The offensive coordinator, JT, as you mentioned, Press Taylor was very, very bad. Ryan Nielsen was historically bad on defense, and Shad Khan even talked about that. And through that as part of the reason for firing Doug, because he came in last year and said, hey, we were 20th in defense. We need to go get better. We need to move on from Caldwell. Let's go bring in Ryan Nielsen. And now we're last in pretty much every category, certainly in the secondary, second to last in sacks. And so this was a team certainly that underachieved the talent. But you look at these last 3 years, the talent on the Jaguars, I know as fans we're biased, but realistically, we're somewhere around 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe if the ball goes the right way, Tim. But we're not a legit contender. We've had too much free agency spent where we spent the most amount of money in the NFL in 2022. We spent a ton of money this past year. We've had a lot of top 5 draft picks, 2 back-to-back number 1 overall picks. And so there's a reason why on Monday, everyone's tweeting out that people in the NFL are shocked that the Jaguars kept Trent Baalke. But we as Jaguars fans know we always do the shocking thing. We always do the weird thing. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah, when you look at it logically and from that perspective, yes, Trent Baalke should absolutely have been let go. But you also have to remember, Shad Khan doesn't seem to have that much football knowledge and not that many people that he turns to. And so if he fires both the head coach and GM, he's got no one to kind of bounce off ideas. And that's why I think he's kind of still around, but he may not make it to the season. A lot of people are holding out hope. But also, it very much seems that Shad also hates hiring a GM. He's only done it twice his entire time. It's much harder, I think, to find a GM than it does a head coach. It's hard to look at a body of work, and you have to really know a lot of people. And I think that's a lot of work for him. And so that's why we'll get to it. But it seemed like Shad was saying if someone came in with an idea of a different person, he'd do it just because he doesn't himself want to do the search. He'd rather have someone give him the idea. And what I'm referencing is during the press conference with Shad Khan and Trent Baalke on Monday after the firing of Doug Pederson, Mia O'Brien asked if the head coach possibly wanted to look at removing or going a different way with a GM, would Shad be open to that? And Shad said that if they came in with an idea and that idea made sense, that would be something worth considering, which pretty much, and Trent was sitting right there, and a lot of people are making fun of us because it seems dysfunctional, and it's a little dysfunctional for sure. It's not the perfect way. You'd rather have it cleaned house, but it seems like Shad Khan wants to do a lot more hands-on, and he just doesn't have that much knowledge, so he's not going to fire his only kind of contact into the NFL world. But it seems like Trent Baalke is extremely hot seat. And if Ben Johnson or anyone else came to Shad Khan with an idea of like, hey, I don't want to work with Trent, I have this guy all ready to go, this is our idea, I think Shad Khan would definitely pull the trigger and get rid of Trent.
Shout out to Mia O'Brien for asking that question as a follow-up in that press conference with Shad and with Trent Baalke, because it was asked earlier and Shad just danced around it and started weirdly talking a lot about the medical staff. I mean, it was bizarre how much we talked about the medical staff when everything should have been focused on football, given the nature of your head football coach being fired, given the nature of your football team being 4-13. And I'm like, okay, I'm glad that Shad is open to it, but that is bizarre to me. I mean, why in the world would you sit there and say, I'm going to give more power and authority to the decision-making of the Jacksonville Jaguars to a guy that's not connected at all? Look, I want Ben Johnson to come and be head coach, but everyone is saying that keeping Trent Baalke, I mean, it was the same in 2022 when we brought on Doug Pederson. The keeping Trent Baalke makes this head coaching job that should be very attractive mildly unattractive, because 3 head coaches under Baalke, more than any other GM in the last several decades in the NFL, 3 of them have only lasted 1 year, including, of course, Urban Meyer, 2 of those being at the 49ers as well. And so it was a bizarre press conference on so many levels.
Watching that, listening to his full answer on that Mia O'Brien question, it comes across as somebody who just doesn't care. Joel, you keep saying he doesn't have the knowledge, and I think that's true. But I think which he recognizes, but I just don't think he cares about the football side. There have been comparisons of Shad Khan and Jerry Jones in the sense that both of the fan bases are frustrated with their ownership, and they feel like their ownership is holding them back. But in reality, I think those two are on opposite sides of the spectrum. Jerry Jones cares so much about the football aspect of it and is so meddling and is so involved with every single thing that he tries to almost make himself the de facto head coach at times. Whereas Shad Khan wants to take the approach that he does not care at all about what happens in the football. Like no accountability, no firing of anybody after getting blown out multiple times on national television this season. Like, what are we doing? Like, it's the opposite end of the spectrum of Jerry Jones. And to your guys' point, I don't think his ideal situation is just pick somebody that he can trust, but he doesn't know enough about football to know who to trust. And so the only way the Jaguars are ever going to be good is if he accidentally picks the right guy. And to his credit, he's tried a lot of different things. He's tried Tom Coughlin. He's tried Urban Meyer. He's tried Doug Pederson, a Super Bowl winning coach. Like Coughlin, obviously a Super Bowl winning coach as well. But the reason why they ran him out of Jacksonville in 2003 was because Coughlin was a terrible GM. If they could have fired Coughlin, the GM, and kept Coughlin, the coach, they would have. They couldn't. And that's the situation they're in. It's just like, you're so close in some of these things, Shad, but you're still not getting what needs to be done.
I don't really understand why a lot of people are thinking that with this whole what's happening right now is that Shad Khan pretty much was giving Trent Baalke a pass or like a glowing review. And I don't think that's it at all. Trent Baalke, and it sounds like they asked him who's his sounding board of like football ideas. And he said it was the coaches, coordinators, and GM. So if he fires everyone, he has
which is a brutal sounding board. Nielsen, Pederson, and Press.
Well, and it's all just an echo chamber.
Exactly.
Of course, we're all doing everything right. We had the best team ever assembled.
Well, no, I know, but I really do think that he doesn't or he's like would be willing to get rid of Trent. Like, this isn't a glowing review. Like, yes, he's going to be here and we're going to extend him or anything like that. It's more of, I need someone to like bounce ideas off of because I really don't understand what I'm doing.
He doesn't want to think about it. It's like if you're outsourcing something, let's say you're outsourcing your oil change and you have somebody who's telling you all about how you change your oil in your car. Like, look, dude, I don't really care. You seem fine and you're at a reasonable price. Just do it. That's kind of the impression that I get from Shad Khan. He's outsourcing it all. And so he's trusting that the people he's outsourced it to are going to be able to get a job done at least efficiently enough and good enough to where he doesn't have to constantly be firing his oil change guy every couple of years and finding a different one.
Exactly. And to your point earlier, Joey, you look at the Jaguars have tried a ton of different head coaches, but we've only had 2 general managers under Shad Khan. And we did an episode a couple months ago where we talked about Shad Khan and just, JT, you laid out that Shad Khan has the worst NFL record of any owner that's owned a team for longer than 100 games. And so you would think that you would change some things, and he's tried head coach, but the one thing he seems to refuse to try is to change the general manager. And so we get stuck with bad general managers, and then we're going to bring in, and we'll talk about all these interviews for different head coaches, but you're going to bring in almost certainly a new head coach. Just looking at the list, almost none of these guys have head coach experience. And who's going to get a lot of the power is going to be the guy who's been general manager for over a decade. And so, yes, I agree that there was not a glowing review by Baalke, but it just feels like it's going to end up in the direction where Baalke is going to have a lot of power in the Jaguars organization, which is crazy to me.
I don't see it that way. I see whoever gets brought in is going to get the power, and it's going to be
no.
Well, yeah,
They're going to be a new head coach.
Jack's exactly right. Who is going to be giving him this power?
Oh, it's
not
Baalke.
Shad. Shad does not care. Shad wants this thing
Shad's
run
on his
autopilot.
No,
Shad is going.
Think so. Like,
yes,
he's talking about how the new head coach is going to talk to him specifically. Not
That's
to the
what
GM
Doug
anymore.
did too. Doug
reported directly to
Yes.
Doug.
Doug went to Trent, and then they would
No,
both go.
Shad said multiple
to
times
Shad.
that Doug reports to me.
Yes.
Reported, sorry.
Yes, and it's he does not want to be involved in the day-to-day stuff, and so basically he's going to say, you both report to me, figure it out amongst yourselves. I still think what happened last season is somebody has to be fired for missing the playoffs. You talk amongst yourselves who we should fire.
That's
and
what Shad
I think
said.
I think that's exactly what happened, and they decided to just fire the DC because that was the one guy they don't care about as much.
It wasn't that they missed the playoffs. It was, we had this giant collapse. Who is at fault? And then they said, well, it's not me. It's not me. Well, it must be Mike Caldwell.
What I don't think happened is Shad Khan said, this was a huge collapse. Let's fire Mike Caldwell.
I
don't think that happened.
Not at all. No.
My point is
that Trent and Doug both go to him. So he literally goes, what was the problem? And then Doug's like, it's not me. And then Trent's like, oh, it's not me. I gave you this great roster. And then
the best
the
roster
man
ever.
the man who's not there talking with Shad. Oh, it's Mike Caldwell. Mike Caldwell leaves. Okay, let's go fix it. Go get a DC. Now this is the best roster because the roster is good. Trent said it wasn't his fault. Doug said it wasn't his fault. So the offense is going to be good. And then now we got this brand new DC. He's this young guy. It's going to be a great team. It was both their fault, and they said neither one. You fired someone who it wasn't actually his fault. You kept the issue, and now you fire what I think is actually a bigger issue than 65% because he hasn't developed anybody. Trevor has not gotten better. Etienne has downgraded. Christian Kirk hasn't played as well as he's used to.
He's been injured the last year and a half.
No one on defense has gotten better. They've either middled or gotten worse. Like the development
Walker,
of
Josh Hines Allen.
Yeah, I would say that BTJ's gotten better. Josh Hines, that's a silly.
Was always good. No, what are you talking about? BTJ was always good.
So Josh Hines Allen got worse over the course of 4 years in Jacksonville.
He was always a good guy. The only thing that made him different was he went and left the team and did it by himself and got himself better. And then guess what? They move him instead of being an edge guy. They move him to DN. He adds 15 pounds. He was just finally starting to finish sacks because he's always had the pressure amount. So he's always getting there, but he was never getting there quite enough. So he goes out, leaves by himself, gets better, not because of the coaches. He got better because he left the coaches. Gets better. He comes back. They change his position. He gets worse. Trayvon Walker may be the only one, and I'm guessing that's because they spend all their time with him trying to get him better because everyone's like, you missed here, you missed here. They don't want to seem like they missed, so they give him all the time. Cisco's gotten worse. Campbell's no much better.
Joey, it doesn't matter because those are not our current coaches. But if you think that Shad Khan is now going to give the new coaching person more power than the GM, or if you think that the new coach is going to have quote unquote the tiebreaker over the GM,
statement literally is.
It's a lie. You're lying. You are living in a fantasy land because
why would he say that if they came up with an idea that he would get rid of Trent Baalke?
He's just saying that. I don't think that's an actual real thing. I don't think if Ben Johnson comes in and says, because he went on to say that like unless there's nefarious or unless he goes on and on talking about is there an ulterior motive, is it just ego, is it all this other stuff, and so his point is that
he doesn't want to fire Trent just because I don't want to work with Trent. He wants someone to come in and be like, hey, Ben Johnson, I want to bring Agnew. He's the assistant guy for the Lions. We're best friends. We'll work together. Like he wants a full out plan. He doesn't.
That should not be on the new head coach to decide who should be the GM.
Oh no,
Well,
of course not.
That's
even
insane.
Of course not.
Even
You should
if
hire a consultant
Joey,
team or do it yourself.
Joey,
but
guess
he doesn't
what?
want to put in the work. Yes, you're right.
Guess what? Let's say Ben Johnson says all of those things that you say, and Liam Coen says, I can work with Trent. I'm excited for the opportunity to be a new thing. Well, it's an easy decision for Shad, because then he doesn't have to worry about two new question marks. He already knows Trent and knows the quote unquote pros and cons of him. That and there is no tiebreaker. If you had told me that Shad Khan came at the end of last season and said, we need to fire Mike Caldwell, he is the reason why that he's our problem, and that was not Doug or Trent's decision, then you can convince me that he would give that new coach more power, but he doesn't. He does not want to be involved. He's the type of guy that just says, figure it out amongst yourselves. That has always been his MO. And so just hiring a new coach, Trent is absolutely going to be weighing in on that. And if you're thinking that all of a sudden that new coach is going to have more power, it's just dead wrong.
So here's the good news of Shad Khan, and you compared him, JT, to Jerry Jones. And I look across the board at NFL owners. You know, the Bears have had a huge collapse, 11 losses in a row. They were chanting at their last home game, sell the team. And essentially you have three major problems with NFL owners. You have the Jerry Jones situation, where owner is just way too involved, way too meddling. He is essentially the de facto Cowboys GM. You'll also have the problem where you'll see this, especially with the Bengals, somewhat with the Bears too, where an owner is just too cheap. And so fortunately for the Jaguars fans, if you want to look like glass half full or 2/3 full, the Jags don't have either of those two problems. Shad Khan is willing to pay money. And you look at some of these big names for head coaches, the good news is, hey, we may not have the most attractive situation with Baalke, but we know Shad Khan is going to pay a lot of money and typically give a pretty long leash to the head coach. I mean, the reality is, too, we all thought Doug was going to be fired in the middle of the season. We thought it was crazy. He did not. We thought he was only delaying it because he was going to completely clean house. Shad gave Doug a super, super long leash. So as we look at these 8 head coach candidates that the Jaguars have reached out to in official capacity. So the official list is Kellen Moore, offensive coordinator from the Eagles, Todd Monken, OC from the Ravens, Joe Brady, OC with the Bills, Liam Coen, OC with the Buccaneers, Ben Johnson, OC with the Lions, Aaron Glenn, DC with the Lions, Patrick Graham, DC with the Raiders, and Robert Saleh, former head coach of the Jets.
And let's start breaking these down with the odds on favorite right now, talking on January 8th on who is going to be the next coach. And according to Athlon Sports, Liam Coen actually is now edging out Ben Johnson as the odds on favorite to be the next coach with 1 to 3 odds as the Jaguars.
No, to Liam Coen. It had been Ben Johnson. And then literally just this morning, it switched. Yeah,
so let's start with Liam Coen, 1 to 3 odds. He's the offensive coordinator currently with the Bucs. What do we know about him?
Yeah, so Coen is, like a lot of these guys on the list, more offensive minded. He's not been a head coach before, but he comes as the offensive coordinator from the Bucs, who have had a fantastic year offensively, scoring 29.5 points per game, which by comparison, the Jaguars have scored under 19 points. So you're talking about an offense that has scored more than 10 points than the Jags, that put them 4th overall. And then you look at, in terms of yards, the Buccaneers are also 3rd offensively. He comes out of Sean McVay's coaching tree. So he's coached at the Rams a bunch, wide receivers and quarterbacks from 2018 to 2020. He also coached in college as the OC for Kentucky on 2 different occasions and helped their offensive turnaround. So you look at the pros for a guy like Coen. The pros are obviously he comes from a great coaching tree and Sean McVay. A lot of these guys have seen some good success out of his coaching tree. He's helped a quarterback have a big turnaround in Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield torched it this year, 4,500 yards, 41 touchdowns. And he is an aggressive play caller. I was watching press conferences with him. He says, I hate to punt. I hate to kick field goals. Kind of sounds a little bit like the Lions, but he's a younger, creative play caller. The cons are going to be he has no head coach experience, And you're going to need to bring in, if you bring in a guy like this, like several others, you're going to need to bring in a strong defensive candidate to run the defensive side of the ball. But what are some of y'all's thoughts on Liam Coen?
My favorite thing about him is the turnaround that he's had with Baker Mayfield. I think that needs to be kind of the number one thing is Trevor is now your franchise. You just paid him all this money. You need him performing at the best. You need to be giving him a coach that is going to attach a balloon to him and make him even better than he is instead of an anchor, which I think Doug was. You got to be able to develop him. I think he has all the skill set. He has more skill set than I think Baker does. I hope that he can polish the pearl and bring Trevor into this. Like if you watch also the Buccaneers, he has a lot of plays where they're wide open. Yes, they have good wide receivers, but Chris Godwin got hurt. So he's not had all the best wide receivers. He's got Mike Evans, but he's dealing with a rookie with McMillan. He's made him look pretty good. There's other wide receivers that you haven't even like heard of, and he's still able to run the offense at such a high pace, even with not the most top tier talent.
One more thing on Liam Coen. He also played quarterback at University of Massachusetts. So he will be geared, to your point, Joey, towards quarterback, towards Trevor Lawrence. I think that's a big reason why he's the odds-on favorite. Of course, Ben Johnson, the odds have gone down because of Baalke, but I think he's an odds-on favorite because he'd be more willing to say yes, even if it isn't perfect, because he would be open to a head coach opportunity.
Yeah, and look, I'd be happy with Coen. There's a lot of reasons to give him the reins, but I think he has more question marks than the next guy, and that's Ben Johnson. And that is one that all three of us have loved. I think almost all Jaguar fans have loved him from the get-go. And look, there's a lot of comparisons in my mind of what Goff was like for the LA Rams before he came over to Detroit and Trevor. Both of them struggle under pressure, especially when they're getting blitzed. Both of them seem to be first-read quarterbacks. Both of them struggle on the road and in tougher environments. But Ben Johnson has elevated Goff to a near MVP type of level and has the Detroit Lions offense number one in almost all categories, including scoring offense, where he's averaging over 33 points per game. And so as I was prepping and digging into who is this Ben Johnson guy and what's his philosophy, where does he come from, he excites me on every single thing that I read. So for starters, his dad was actually a college coach at Idaho State and Citadel. And one of his philosophies that Ben attributed to him was saying, the question is not, are we going to win? It's how much are we going to win by? And so he has this philosophy of how do I maximize every play, every point? How do I maximize this offense? And when you watch Detroit, it doesn't matter if the score is 13-13. His goal is they're not trying to win barely. They're trying to win by an exorbitant amount and play perfectly. He was a backup quarterback in North Carolina. He was not anything successful from a player perspective, but he was under Frank Cignetti, who is the brother of Curt Cignetti, currently at the Indiana coach, who I love and respect a lot. And then John Shoup, who's another great offensive mind. He would say that his three biggest influences were the West Coast offense, the Manning-led offense under Peyton Manning, and then Mike Martz's greatest show on turf, St. Louis Rams offense back in the day. He's played from a number of different styles. He's willing to take from a number of different coaching styles that he gets. You watch them; they're doing things super creative. I mean, they're doing pitch plays. They are doing all sorts of different things that other teams aren't. He's willing to learn from anyone from Andy Reid to Cliff Kingsbury. He's always looking to innovate and evolve his playbook. And one of the press conferences he had this year with the media is he said his offense is focused on three main things: being physical, being detailed, and being explosive. All three of those things are things that Jaguars have lacked for years on offense, but I do think we have the weapons to potentially make all three of those a reality.
Yeah, and I think he's the apple of Shad's eye, listening to the press conference talking about we were super predictable, and one of the things he's looking for is unpredictability. And out of all these candidates, it's easily Ben Johnson who has the most unpredictable offense with how many trick plays and fun different schemes that he does, where it's not going to be your vanilla offense that some other people run, where like Doug we're going to get on a center, we're going to run it, or we're going to throw a screen, very predictable. He's out of the box. He's a young mind and has thrived kind of everywhere. So hope that Trent Baalke is not the reason why we don't get him.
There was a quote that Ben Johnson gave one of the Detroit media saying that something that one of his predecessors said that really sticks with him is we want to do the same things. We want the same things to look different and the different things to look the same. So while his offense is wildly complex, by considering formations as well as the verbiage attached to each play call, it decreases how much information Detroit players need to remember each week and allowing them to play faster. He'll swap out most of those formations and presenting something entirely different, meaning he will run similar play concepts out of different formations. And then the next week, he's going to be running different formations with the similar play call. It's very, very interesting. It's super high level. And it makes sense when you've just grown up around coaching your entire life.
There's a clear reason why he is the Jaguars fans' favorite. I mean, we've been tweeting about him for months. In fact, we did an episode maybe about 2 months ago that you can go back and listen to as well, where we broke down a lot of our favorite options. And what's really cool now is to see, hey, a lot of these line up. So JT, in your top three, you had Ben Johnson one, you had Kellen Moore in there too. We're interviewing both those. Joey, you had Ben Johnson and Joe Brady. We're interviewing both of those. I had Ben Johnson and Todd Monken. We're interviewing both of those. And so definitely go listen to that. But Ben Johnson fills what I believe are the two biggest holes that we're missing with Doug Pederson and his coach. Number one, which we've already talked about a ton, is creative play calling. But number two is also leadership, because he comes from under Dan Campbell. He's been by his side for several years now. Everyone loves the Lions. In many ways, everyone's cheering for them. They've become America's team. They've become this incredible fun story. They're 15-2, number one seed. They look very, very incredible on both sides of the ball, especially on offense. And so he comes from a guy like Dan Campbell, who just knows how to lead a group of men. He knows how to get the best out of them. He knows how to motivate them, get them fired up. And so I think Ben Johnson is going to be able to, number one, take a lot of that away. And then number two, call Dan Campbell whenever and say, hey, I need to get some of these guys on the Jaguars team just can't get motivated. So it's going to be interesting. But the hard thing with Ben Johnson, the reason his odds have already fallen and may fall further, is he's a very picky guy. He's already turned down multiple head coach opportunities. He's going to be heavily pursued by Chicago, which a lot of people think may be the favorite for Ben Johnson, given Caleb Williams and a lot of offensive weapons there, and just a bigger market and bigger city. It's going to be interesting. And I think the one thing the Jaguars have that may pay off is going to be Shad Khan is not afraid to write a big check for the guy he likes. So maybe that's able to persuade Ben Johnson. Maybe he says, I'm going to wait around another year. But there's a reason he's our number one. There's a reason he's going to be pretty much every Jaguars fan number one in search.
Yeah, so continue on the list. The next one is Joe Brady, another offensive mind, been the offensive coordinator now for the Bills for a year and a half, had a lot of success with New Orleans, with LSU as a passing game coordinator, and then the offensive coordinator. What's the breakdown and pros and cons here for Joe Brady?
Yeah, I had Joe Brady. So he's the youngest at 35. He's from Florida. So he'd be coming back to his home state. He played wide receiver in college, but never was, I think he played like 2 games in college. So he sat the entire time. And he also never played in the NFL, but that allowed him to go straight into coaching. He started coaching pretty much right after his football seasons ended. And he went and worked with under Sean Payton, the Saints for a while. And then he became the passing coordinator with Joe Burrow at LSU, led him to the national championship, and then went to the Bills and was the passing coordinator. And I think his most glowing thing is the Bills started off 5-5 and were terrible on offense. They fire their OC, promote Joe Brady, and then in an instant, it changed to a very good offense. They started to win, and I don't remember if they just made the playoffs or was just about, but they went on and won all their last games except one and had a great season. And they're also having an incredible season this year, one of the hardest offenses to stop. It really looks like he is a great offensive mind. But his questions are, so he's worked with Joe Burrow, who is considered one of the best quarterbacks, and then went and worked with Josh Allen, who has obviously shown this year to be one of the best quarterbacks in all NFL. Is he better than Patrick Mahomes? Right now, I think he is. I think he's the best quarterback. Joe Brady obviously was able to get him to fix his interceptions, and that has just changed him completely. He is super efficient. He can run it, throw it. So the question is, can he take a more rough prospect and make him into a better one, or did it already have to be polished and he could make someone who's already great better? So the question is, with how much needs to be fixed in Jacksonville, can he fix all of it to make it as good as it can be, or does he need things to already be in place and it to be kind of a good situation for him to be good? That is my question on Joe Brady.
Basically what you're saying is he's been able to take good situations and make them great, but can he take a bad to mid situation and can he make that great? I think that remains to be seen. He obviously had a stint for 2 years as Carolina Panthers offensive coordinator in 2020, 2021, where he did not reach those same level of expectations. Could be a number of reasons why that has happened. He is really young. I have loved Joe Brady. I've loved his style. I would not be upset if we hired him, but I think he's got way more risks than the first two guys we talked about already. There's been rumors that he's been quote unquote difficult to get along with, or there's been rumors of why he's been
perfect
passed. Exactly. That he's been passed up before for other positions. Even the Bills position, he wasn't the offensive coordinator. He had to like earn that once they fired Ken Dorsey.
Passing coordinator.
There, and he's certainly proved himself there. So I don't have a problem with him, but he is young and you'll probably have some learning experiences with that.
I agree. I would grade Brady and Coen pretty similarly. Maybe, given what y'all just said, maybe now a slight edge to Coen. Again, I think they clearly helped solve the offensive play calling, which has been a problem big time the last 2 years. Way too predictable. Heck, if Shad Khan knows it's too predictable, then it's way too predictable. So we move on from Press Taylor being the one calling the plays. Both of those would be massive upgrades in that area. I just don't know. It's a giant question mark. Can they solve the culture, the leadership problem in Jacksonville where everyone's always kind of passing the buck of, oh, that wasn't on me, that was on them? And you need someone to come in and take charge. And I just don't know, especially with his age and him never being head coach, for Brady and for Coen, both in their 30s, that's a big, big question.
Yeah, but I also, with Brady, that I don't like is his offense is a lot more similar to Doug's than Ben Johnson and Cohen's. They're more vertical, whereas Joe Brady is a lot more horizontal. You watch the Bills, they don't go deep that often. A lot of sling passes to the running back, a lot of wide receiver screens-esque, easy passes, and it's working for the Bills, but I don't know if it's going to work for the Jags. I don't see his style of offense being that much different than Doug's, and I think we need to be much more vertical with BTJ. Evan Ingram was not taken advantage of vertically at all. I feel like we are much more Tampa Bay, Lions-esque type offense where we're going to go deep instead of, hey, we're going to sling pass it to the running back, check down, wide receiver screen.
He feasted on short game, meaning like quick one or two step backs and throw immediately and doing a lot of pre-snap reads. And so look, if he can simplify that for Trevor, there's an argument to be made that that's just a better version of what we're currently running today. And so it's less of like unknowns of what Trevor can or can't do.
But a lot of it depends on personnel too, because when you look at the Lions are stacked with speed and weapons. Same for the Bucs when they have everyone healthy. And the Bills, I mean, Joe, you've dogged on the Bills and the wide receivers and their weapons all year. So what he was able to do with almost no receivers, limited tight end play, you've got to give him some credit for that too.
No, granted. And that's because the Bills' talent needs that type of offense. The question would be, Joe Brady coming here, would he see that we are possibly a more vertical team with a very tall, fast wide receiver, with a quarterback can throw the long bomb, and an offensive line and running back that's not really built to run right at you? It's more of a draw, like throw first, and everyone's playing back, and then you sneak a running back, through a seam. They're not I'm going to carry you 3 yards. You're going to know we're running it. If they know that we're running it, we're getting tackled in the backfield. We don't have a big running back, not a big offensive line. That's just not the running scheme that would ever work. And unfortunately, Doug didn't realize that and just kept doing the same thing over and over and over again.
The next one down the list, there's a big drop off after those top three. Those seem to be the three leaders in the house for obvious reasons. The next one is Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator for the Lions. Look, up and coming. They've had so many injuries this year, and they've still remained pretty good. That they're forcing a lot of turnovers. They're making a lot of big plays, big emphasis on physicality. But if you read most of the Lions fans, there's always question marks on the defense over the last couple of years. He's somebody that I'm certainly less low on, and I'd be very surprised if he's our next coach, considering that I think we go offense, considering how much money we are investing on that side of the ball.
Our green flags are on offense, so I would assume that our next coach would be either an OC or a head coach that was geared more towards offense, which leads us next to Kellen Moore, the Eagles OC. He's been an OC now around the league a little bit. He's 36. He had a super successful QB career. He played QB at Boise State, played a little bit in the NFL, was a backup a long time. So he has less coaching experience. He's only been coaching for a while, but everywhere he's coached, he's been OC. He was OC for the Cowboys under Dak, made it to 2 playoffs, and then he was the OC for the Chargers, which he didn't do great there, and then now he's the OC for the Eagles and has done fairly well. Good, and I like that he's been a successful quarterback in his life, but when he was with the Chargers, he didn't do very well, and I think Justin Herbert's pretty similar to Trevor, and I didn't feel like he got Justin Herbert to be performing better, kind of similar that he's always been. So I'm not as huge on Kellen Moore, and also he hasn't coached that long, so I just don't think he's a head coach material. I think he still needs a lot more time as a OC or a different type of coach instead of a head coach.
Sure. Eagles situation is going to be really, really interesting, especially as they've struggled in the playoffs. As good as they've been, could Sirianni be out and Moore be in as the head coach? A lot of question marks. We're going to kind of fly through these next couple because we want to get ready for what seems to be a lot of Jaguars news happening really, really fast. So make sure to follow and engage with us on Twitter or X at the Jag Bros. We're going to post our rankings of each there. But one more offensive guy than 2 defensive guys. You had Todd Monken. He's the offensive coordinator for the Ravens. Cool random fun fact. He was born in Wheaton, Illinois, which is where I went to college. So shout out to the Wheaties. We're just raising champions there in Wheaton. He is the oldest candidate, so that's why most likely I just don't see us going that direction. He's 58 years old. He has 35 years coaching. He does have a Jags connection, as he was our wide receiver coach from 2007 to 2010. And his biggest success has been as the OC quarterback coach for Georgia, leading him to several championships from 2020 to 2022. And then the last 2 years being able to coach the Ravens offense, which of course functions very, very, very differently with the unicorn and 2-time, maybe 3-time MVP in Lamar Jackson. And so it's hard to see. He's a guy I like and I think could be a great head coach. I just don't love the fit here in Jacksonville. And then we had 2 more defensive coaches as well.
I had Patrick Graham, who is the Raiders defense coordinator. I think this would be the worst pick. He's 45, so he's a little older, a little more experienced, but everywhere he's been, he hasn't done well. He was a defensive line coach at first, which we've seen what happens when we have defensive line coaches with Ryan Nielsen, so that has me scared. But he started off as a DC in Miami, which went 5-11. And then he was assistant head coach and DC for the Giants, who went 6-10 and 4-13. Wasn't great there. And then now is with the Raiders for 3 years, and they've gone 6-11. He had one good year, 8-9, and then another bad year, 4-13. So just doesn't have a lot of success. He doesn't have a lot of playing. He's a defensive guy, defensive line guy. His defenses also weren't high takeaway teams either. So just not what I would want. It would look like almost like a Ryan Nielsen-esque head coach. And I think that'd be terrible.
Absolutely. And it is going to be interesting. Are these last 2 guys, are they potential just early interviews for DCs? The other guy is Robert Saleh, the head coach for the Jets through 2021 through 2024. He was a part of the Aaron Rodgers debacle. He ends up being fired earlier in the season and clearly was not the major problem because they never got better once he was gone. But he's a defensive-minded guy as well, focused on linebackers and defensive line. He was, in fact, the Jags linebacker coach from 2014 to 2016. He was a very good defensive coordinator for the 49ers from 2017 to 2020. Helped lead that defense to the Super Bowl, and that's when he got his offer to coach for the Jets. I think he could be actually, he may be one of the top defensive coordinator options, but he's just not an exciting option for head coach at all. He would rank, I think, probably for all of us pretty low, maybe 7th or 8th of this list, because he just hadn't had success at the head coach position. 20-36, clearly is coming out of a dysfunctional situation again as well. And we're trying to find someone coming from a good culture, which is why the Lions guys are so high, the Bills guys are so high, the Bucs. We want someone from a winning, good culture. But if we bring in a Ben Johnson or Liam Coen or someone like that, Robert Saleh is a guy for a potential defensive coordinator to partner with.
Definitely. And that's my biggest issue. I do think he was dealt a terrible hand with the Jets, handcuffing him with Zach Wilson and then Aaron Rodgers, but also no one else interviewed or asked for an interview from him to be a head coach. Everyone's just looking at him as a DC. So I don't like that we were the only team to ask an interview for head coach. And if things are right, and like this would be the nightmare for the Jaguars, because he is a type of coach that would listen to whatever Trent Baalke, like he obviously goes with whatever is being told to him. Like he never kind of stood up and was like, no, we're not going to do this. He still had to start Zach Wilson. He did the Aaron Rodgers thing. And so like he would do whatever kind of Trent Baalke wanted, and that would be an absolute nightmare for the Jaguars. So I really don't like that for the culture and changing things. That would make Trent Baalke, I think, stay longer, and it would be Baalke's team if Saleh was head coach.
Oof, no, definitely no on that. One final note, and then Joey, you can wrap us up, but one final thing to note from Sunday's loss against the Colts in overtime is the Jaguars now officially have the 5th overall pick. So we're going to be churning out some draft content on our YouTube channel, so make sure to subscribe there.
Yes, we'll be bringing draft content, who we should take with the 5th pick, and on. What would be the best first-round guy. But until then, we're going to end it out. Hope everyone follows us on X or YouTube or Instagram. Follow us, comment, like, and subscribe. We'll read your ratings out. If you give us good 5-star ratings, you'll get to hear it on the podcast. So until then, we'll end it out with how we always do. Well, no, we're going to change it because I'm optimistic now that we've changed some stuff and we're looking at a new year. So let's end it how we used to end it.
Dude.